Get ready to meet David Campany, a visionary curator, writer, editor, and educator who stands as one of the most prolific thinkers in photography. At the University of Westminster, David inspires the next generation of photographers. His role as curator at large for the International Center of Photography involves curating exhibitions that challenge and captivate. With a staggering portfolio of over 36 photography books, David's influence is vast. His essays, numbering over 300, grace the pages of monographs, museums, and magazines worldwide. David's contributions to photography have been recognized with numerous prestigious awards, including the ICP Infinity Award, the Alice Award, and the Royal Photographic Society Award. Join us as we explore David Campany's MyFIVE images from an unknown photographer, Walker Evans, Edith Head, Laur Alangue, and Justine Kurlin. So David Campany, author, curator, educator, and at some level photographer as well. It's a pleasure to have us here on the Crit House. Thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be here, Jeff. Thank you.
Yeah, and you have chosen 5 images, which we'll talk about in a second, which I am excited to talk about because you've gone and are representing some imagery that we have not seen here on the program before. But tell us about yourself. So when you tell somebody what you do in this world, I mean, I said you're a curator and a educator, all that, but what do you tell people you do and who you are?
The short version usually is curator, writer, educator. Because I make a lot of exhibitions, I do a lot of writing, and I've been involved in teaching in one form or another for quite a while now. So yes, it's slightly hyphenated. There could be more. I could put editor or broadcaster or sometimes artist in there, but generally the 3 will do, kind of curator, writer, educator. That's fine.
So you've chosen 5 images that have meaning for you. What was the logic of coming up with the images you've chosen?
Oh, well, when your email invitation came, I had just finished a spring clean of my house. I'm sitting in the basement of my house. It doesn't all look like this. It's just a lot.
It's not a library on every wall of a.
Try to keep it all in one. But I was thinking about the images I live with, as opposed to ones I like very much, but I couldn't possibly live with, or works that I've maybe exhibited in shows. And I think it's a curious kind of subset of one's own interests, the things that one will actually put on the wall. I tend not to put anything sentimental on the wall, but they are all different things that I guess mean something to me, but I do like living with them. I do like having them around. They do hold my attention enough. It's a curious thing putting images on the wall at home, because usually they just kind of disappear into the decor, and after a while you don't notice them at all. That's not the case with these. It's not like I stand and stare at them all the time, but they do hold my attention around the house. So I chose 5 of those. There's probably maybe a dozen things on the wall at home, not many. But I chose 5 that I live with.
Well, I mean, it is an interesting choice what you put on the walls, because the images that you love and are moving and powerful are not necessarily the things that you may want to pass on a daily basis and look at, because it might take you into, because some of those images are powerful from a political or a war imagery, or things that are not that have meaning, but not necessarily what the thing that you want in your home, right?
Yeah. And I guess we all have different reasons for why we might want to live with certain pictures and not live with others, even though they mean a lot to us. It's a bit like certain movies. There are certain movies that mean a great deal to me that I've seen only once, and I can't bring myself to watch again because it was too powerful. I can think of quite a few of those. Maybe maybe when you're putting things on the wall, they are images that you might be happy to come back to, fairly regularly.
And we will start with this Walker Evans poster from an exhibition at Dartmouth College here in the States.
Yes, well, I've turned out to be someone who's been interested in Evans for a long time, of that generation that kind of came of an age in the 20s, early 30s. He's the one that means the most to me, but I think he's also the one that seems to resonate still. There's a lot of younger photographers that find him contemporary in some way, that while his images are kind of resonant with the period in which he was working, which is really from the late 20s to the 70s, there's something about his disposition and his attitude that is still very powerful for people. And yeah, this is a poster. I think it was quite a limited edition poster. It's very nicely printed. It does happen to be signed, this one. I found it on eBay. In fact, I think I found 4 of these things on eBay that I'm going to be talking about. And I always loved this picture. I first came across a variant of it when I was putting together a book on Walker Evans's magazine work, which came out maybe about a decade ago.
Yep.
I went on a rabbit hole and got really fascinated. And in 1953 in Fortune magazine, he published a photo essay called The US Depot. And it was about single building railway stations. That's the ticket office. He shot it in black and white and color. I ended up doing another book on Evans, a little one, and that's a color version.
There it is. Yeah.
And it's still there. I can't remember exactly which town it's in, but a friend of mine who teaches at Yale happened to post a picture of it on Instagram, and I immediately DM'd him and said, "Did you know Evans photographed that? I'm surprised it's still there after all this time." Evans was actually writing about how these station buildings were endangered. He was often writing about things that were about to disappear.
Yes.
So it's something of a miracle that it's still there and it still looks like that. The little hatch is there and the little kind of semicircular shelf underneath is still there. And I came across this poster and thought, wow, that's very, very beautiful. And there weren't many kind of posters or publicity items that Evans was involved in his own lifetime. So he obviously approved of this one and signed it on the bottom. So yeah, it's a lovely thing. I think it also speaks to my interest in photographs existing in different forms. They don't have to be museum-worthy prints. They might be the pages of books or magazines or posters. So it kind of fits in with that. And it is very nice to live with, and it hangs on it hangs above my fireplace. So there's like recesses on either side, and it just fits nicely there architecturally. And I do look at it every day. It's a lovely thing.
Same case with this one from Edith Head.
Well, yes, Edith Head. She's probably the most famous costume designer in the history of Hollywood. I think she's the most decorated with Academy Awards, Oscars. And this is an original costume sketch in, I think it's gouache, ink, and pencil. And it's one of Tippi Hedren's outfits for The Birds, the Hitchcock movie from 1962, I think, something like that. A friend who knew I was interested in Edith Head said to me, "I don't know if they're real or not, but someone is selling pages from her sketchbooks on eBay." I jumped on and bought this. I'm really interested in sketching as preparation for lens-based images, whether it's photography or film. That kind of pre-visualization you might do on paper is fascinating, because in a way a lens-based image is finished as soon as you've made it.
Yeah.
You open the shutter and the world as light kind of floods in. And so the idea some people talk about certain photographs they've made as being notational or sketch-like. I get that. I understand that, but there's something about photography that is kind of finished as soon as you as soon as you've started it. It doesn't quite convince at the level of a sketch. So I'm really fascinated with artists that draw, plot out things before they photograph them. And of course, it's completely standard in film.
Yes.
Filmmaking, either costume sketches or set sketches or storyboards. And I've always been really interested in that translation of one to the other. When I was a kid, sort of age 10, 11, started reading about movies. I noticed Edith Head's name then and kind of looked out for it. And she was quite a character. She's the inspiration for the costume designer in The Incredibles, you know, the Pixar film.
Yes, right.
Little character with the round glasses and the Gates of the Revolution bob hair.
One of the great cartoon characters.
And make you look wonderful. I'm sure she sounds like that in real life. And yeah, so it was just a total treat when I found this. I think I mean, it's very period, kind of late 50s, 60s looking, but just her ease with that kind of line. I don't know how long it took her to do it. Quite amazing. And of course, nobody actually has a shape or an outline like that. So it's interesting to look at the sketch and then look at Tippi Hedren in the movie. Yeah, who wears that outfit for quite a lot of the movie. I think they changed the shade of green. I think it's slightly lighter in the end in the movie.
So I'm interested in that discussion about photographers who start with a drawing, because I'm not familiar with that. I generally shoot street and wander, and so I wouldn't be in a circumstance to be able to do that. I don't think, but like who's a good example of somebody who does that?
Well, I put together a book that came out last year of the work of Robert Cumming, and he died quite recently, but he's a kind of bridge between sort of conceptual art and a highly constructed imagery and really, really fine camera craft. So he would shoot on 8x10, but he would often be making a model or a situation, or he'd need a prop for a picture. And he was an amazing draftsman. And in fact, there are books of his drawings. I can pull one from the shelf, actually. There we go. That's a book primarily of Cumming's drawings.
Wow.
So, yeah. And there was a whole move in the 70s, which still continues, of fabricating things to then photograph them, you know, and that goes all the way from Cumming, you know, right up to people like Jeff Wall, who does sketch things. So it's around. It obviously means that there's a kind of preparatory stage, you know, maybe prior to observation, kind of prior to the photographic act. No, I can't imagine a street photographer sketching, although it'd be interesting if they did.
Makes me wonder if I can try.
Yeah, it reminds me of, you know, The Last Supper by Da Vinci.
Yeah.
Which is in a chapel in northern Italy. Well, when the religious powers that be would come to check on his progress, he was often not there. He was often out in the streets sketching gestures in the marketplace, you know, a hand, a furrowed brow, you know, just trying to capture something spontaneous that he would then put into the, you know, the Last Supper kind of tableau. So that's an interesting relation between, you know, painting, drawing, observation.
Yeah.
If he'd had an iPhone, he would have been doing it.
Would have worked a lot faster.
Yeah.
And we do go into photography here, but with somebody who is unknown.
Yeah, this is on my desk. It lives kind of propped up on a shelf. I'm really interested in the history of press photography, and obviously a lot of newspapers, particularly in the US, over the last decade or so, have sold off their archives of prints and almost invariably they are 8x10. And if you're lucky, there is information on the back of them too. This one has been retouched by hand. In fact, I posted an image of this the other day on Instagram, and someone said, "Is that AI?" And it's well, it's quite a bleak situation. It's 1930s New York. The Communist Party are protesting police violence, and the violent police are breaking up the protest. But it just happens to be a beautifully caught shot. If you just concentrate on the figure in the middle, it's almost like a portrait of him or like a fashion shot. The figures on the left feel to me like more like a movie, more like a film still. But sometimes the world looks like that. And it was $10 or $12 online, and I just thought, that's extraordinary. What an incredible image. There's no photographer's name on the back at all. I could probably do some research, go back through the newspaper or newspapers of the time and see if they were credited. I have done that before with anonymous photos. It's nice to put a name to it. Yeah. But it's a fantastic image, I think. The interesting thing is with news photographs is what's spontaneous, what feels spontaneous, and what feels slightly premeditated and controlled. And of course, this, photographers think really, really quickly. You have to be able to do that. So all kinds of judgments are being made super fast. It's not just reflexes. The mind is capable of making a lot of decisions very, very quickly. And I'm sure that there are aesthetic decisions as well as informational decisions being made here.
I'm always interested in the I mean, photographers, especially when you're on the street or as a journalist, you have to work quickly, but there's also that waiting, working quickly to be ready. And then you're waiting for this man to be where you want him to be at the pose, and so there's speed and patience at the same time.
Yeah, there is, and when they get asked about it, news photographers or kind of spot news photographers talk about it in those terms. What you can wait for and anticipate, what you have to be able to react to. All of that's fascinating, and of course that's something that photography does probably better than any other medium. And I guess that's why people think of street photography being a genre that is very specific to photography, whereas portraiture, still life, landscape, cityscape come from the other arts. The thing that photography introduced was that combination of anticipation and spontaneity. It doesn't have to be the street. It can be done anywhere. I guess the pickings are slightly richer in the street, so that's why they call it street photography. But yeah, and so you get kinds of image that you don't get elsewhere in news photography, for sure.
Your fourth image?
Okay, well, yeah, Laur Alangue, she's not very well known, but if you were in Paris in the 20s and 30s with any interest in photography, you would know her name. She was incredibly widely published. She had one foot in the avant-gardes and another in commercial photography in the mainstream. There's a whole bunch of women modernist photographers of the 20s and 30s, as well as Alangue. There would be people like Germaine Kroll or Marianne Breslauer. That photography was open to them in ways that some of the other professions weren't. Photography was still kind of new. It wasn't very well respected. You didn't necessarily have to train in the academy that didn't let in women. So suddenly there was this great blossoming of a whole number of interesting women photographers who kind of cross backwards and forwards between the avant-garde and the mainstream. And this is actually a plate from a book, a very luxurious book, of which there were only 305 copies. And it's called Micrographie Decorative. So decorative micro photography. So this is microscopic photography. You're looking at little plant details here. I cannot afford the book itself. It sells for thousands and thousands and thousands, but occasionally single pages come up for sale. But the single pages themselves have a kind of window mount, and then the prints are incredible. They are gravures on a kind of metallic paper. So there's a kind of sheen to them. I'll just, I've taken it off the wall. So you might be able to catch a kind of glimmer of the surface.
Oh, yeah, you certainly can.
Yeah, which yeah. So it's really kind of golden and a beautiful, beautiful thing. This one was actually in an exhibition of mine I curated called A Handful of Dust, which debuted in 2015 and then traveled around the world for 6 or 7 years. So it finally kind of came back to me. It was one of 2 of these works that she made that was in the show. So as I walk past it, it catches the light in a different way each time. So they're very, very beautiful things to live with. And the goldenness I like. I remember finding a kind of slightly golden frame to match it. So that gives me a satisfaction.
Where does it reside in your house? I would imagine it would be in a place where the light plays with it.
Yeah, it's in a front room by a bay window, quite near my front door. So I pass it, pass it each time.
Love it.
So you feel it as an object as well as an image. I think probably more so than the other things on my list. Yeah,
somewhat three-dimensional.
Yes.
So your fifth and final work of art is actually 2 images from Justine Kurlin, and they're back in front of a frame. These are the 2 images. So tell us about this work of art.
I first met Justine when I was putting together a book for Aperture about photographers making work on road trips. You know, famously Robert Frank, a lot of others. And not all American. You know, Frank was Swiss, and there were Japanese photographers in that book, and Swiss, and road trip photography in the USA, but often done by people from elsewhere. Justine is from the USA, and I'd seen some of the images, but not many, and I wanted to meet her. So when I was in the offices of Aperture, she came in and she showed me lots more of work she made on the road when her son Casper was growing up. So his pre-teen years, she would take off every summer with him in a van, making images, mainly 4x5. Over the years, those pictures just added up. Sometimes she'd return to the same kind of bohemian communities. She'd move sometimes through the same landscapes. And she's a really incredible image maker, one of my favorite artists. I don't really buy things from galleries very much, but I did buy this when she had a show at Higher Pictures. On one side of the works that were in the show were images of trains and landscapes with trains, which her son Casper loved. And on the other side were images of Casper or her with Casper, so that you can see the 2 of them together there. And they're dry mounted onto this, looks like kind of aluminum or polished steel plate. So if you look closely, you can see me reflected in it. That's strange that I've chosen 2 quite shiny object things. So in the show, they were hung either one way round or another, but you were aware that there was a kind of opposite view. And the lovely thing is, when she made a book of the work, which is called This Train, which was published by MACK earlier this year, it's the same thing. So there's images of trains on one side, and it folds out and it's very, very long. And the more personal images of Caspar and Justine with Caspar are on the other side. So I like the relation between the book and how the work is in exhibition. And this one in particular, I just adore. I don't remember her showing me this picture when I was working on the Open Road book, so it was very, very, very nice to see it.
And so, how do you display it? Is it always the same image forward, or do you?
That one's just rested on a kind of wide shelf, which some bookshelves underneath, and I kind of swap it round now and again. I'm very cautious about leaving color work out on display because I never trust the manufacturers, and I still don't know how stable a lot of color material is. So there's slightly more emphasis on black and white in my choices. The Edith Head is in the costume sketch is in a slightly shady part of the house. I don't really want to overexpose that to light. So there are certain kind of practical issues with the images you put on your walls at home.
It is one of the challenges we all have.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, David, so one of the things you referenced a little bit, but one of the charms I liked about so many of the images you've shown is that, I mean, you took them yourself, and there's a little bit of you visually in each of the images.
Well, believe me, I was trying to get rid of that, but it's
you came close.
Well, the strange thing is, it's a curious thing when the eye gets rid of so much when it's looking at things.
Yes.
You know, anyone who's taken installation shots of their exhibition knows this, you know, that the eye can take out quite a lot of reflection, and the camera can't. And suddenly what looked very, very clear to you, once you've made an image of it, is not very clear at all. Or there are color casts and, you know, weird shadows that you don't really notice until you have to photograph them. Believe me, I was trying to make the best images I could, but
no, I say it in all honesty. They are images that you are showing from your wall in your space that are that you live with on a daily basis. Having you a ghost of you being a part of it, I think is a nice element to have within the image.
I'll take that. That's a nice way of putting it.
Well, again, thank you so much for joining us on the Crit House. It's an honor, given your influence in the photographic world, to have us be a part of this program.
Great pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And thank you all for watching the Crit House.